Thank you. He didn't let me know that. So there's, some of this came about from the fact of timing of when they came in versus when this came to the board. If you look in, I think, would you guys come in September?
If you look at the board, when they said that that was gonna happen, look at the date, we got the email without that clause in it after that. It's February of 22. There was no clause in that lease ever, whether you had the meeting or not. The lease that we agreed to is not there.
The way it was worked at that time, because I don't know if anybody was on the board at that time, but except for I know Helene was, but there was a part of what we worked with was a construction lease. So that during the time which they're going through the design and as they found out the working with our codes department and during construction, that wouldn't subtract from their long-term lease. So there was a short-term construction lease that was then in turn to be, once the construction was completed and they got their letter of occupancy, then they were able to convert it over or to have a standing lease starting the clock again. So that those years, so if it took as long as Dr. George, or if it took less, then, you know, that time wouldn't count against, as you're aware.
It takes less. We're hoping to be less than Dr. George, but we're creeping up on that now, right there with it now.
So that is, as you're aware, later on, Dr. George came back and asked for amendment just to add years back to his lease for that same reason. So that was one of the reasons why we had gone to the short-term construction lease that had a different rate and different terms on it. And then they came back through and had also during the same time frame that the increases, set increases were coming in. All this, there was other discussions in reference to other parts of rental on the airport. And there was a lot of issues that had recently come about from where rents had not been addressed. Then they took big jumps. Then they weren't addressed. Then they took jumps and things of that nature. So there was that was a topic of discussion at the time of how to avoid those big major conflicts again, was to have something that was a standing type of increase. Now I can understand that what their discussion is in reference to it's raw land and you're not doing anything different to raw land. So there is something to that.
If the property value of those hangars goes up, your 3% is pretty much built in when we hand them over to you. Promise they're going to be more than 3% a year if I had to guess on a finished hangar.
So let me see if I can understand this. In October of 21, board set a construction rate and then a permanent ground lease rate, 35 cents, with an escalation clause of 3%.
That's right, listen.
Correct.
The
Yes.
minute showed
That's what it
October 21.
Yeah, I think everybody has a copy of the October minutes
Yes.
where that was said.
But then we, the airport, emailed them a lease that had blank on how much it's going to cost in this copy, I think,
No increase.
and no increase.
It was based on, if you recall, where it says construction. So it was based on that 30 cents a square foot and
But that's not a construction lease. It shows in there 20 years and then the 5 year, it shows the permanent lease.
This is the permanent.
That's the permanent.
on the,
That one, the email I got, the permanent lease shows
I got
20
you.
years, 22 to 42, the 5 year and the 5 1 year. That's not the construction lease. That's the permanent.
What we're looking at though is not a executed. Do we have a copy of the,
We haven't
Signed.
executed a lease yet. When we were set this is gonna be your lease when you're done. We started construction on the hangars and started getting all the ball rolling.
What it appears to me, Mr. Vice Chair, if you don't mind, it appears that what was emailed to them is a sample copy of what we were using, had been using. Because if you'll see at the bottom of page 2, that's where I had put that's the August of 2019 edition. And that's back when they had not set that escalation policy yet, the escalation rate in. So at that time, we obviously probably used this for somebody in 2019. And so I think that That's what appears to happen, is that it's like, here's an example of what your lease probably will look like, the terms that would be in it.
I think that
That's
was
my
actually-
best guess
I
of
think
what
that was-
happened.
Now that you say that, I think that was.
But if you actually,
Was it Mr. Stewart?
if you actually look at that lease right there, it shows the date of 2022 to 2042. This is the lease that we expected to see when we started building these hangars. We were totally unaware of any 3% increase for every year for 30 years. You know, that would have been a little more of a negotiation point at that point, but when we got this lease, permanent lease 3 weeks ago, was the first time we'd ever seen it.
Thoughts?
So there's not an executed lease that has been signed by both parties? Is that what you're saying?
That's correct.
Correct. Y'all had,
It was,
This is just a draft that was sent.
Well,
with email.
here's another little piece of that. Now, we do have an executed lease that we signed that was lost.
oh, the original short-term construction,
Correct.
the 2-year construction.
Right. That
construction lease.
should have started this. I venture to say it's not on there either. It's got lost.
The lease that was signed by both parties?
Do you have that?
We don't know where it went to.
But I mean, it's located. After the council approved it,
Yeah.
I sent it back and for signatures and they haven't been able to locate it since then.
You sent it to where?
I sent it back, back out for them to sign and they say they signed it, but we don't know
We never got
where
it
it
back.
went to from
The
there.
two
Yeah.
copies, you never. got it
I'm
back.
not, I'm not saying they didn't send it back because I don't know that, but
Right.
I never
We
got
were the
a
first ones to sign. There was no signature.
I never
on it
got
when
a
we
copy of
signed
it back in my office. Paul and I both, at least speaking for myself, I tore my office apart looking for it. I don't have a copy, signed copy of the construction lease. But I don't believe, and I don't remember what the construction lease actually says, but does it have anything in there about conversion over to the ground lease in the terms in the construction lease?
I don't recall. I don't think so,
No,
because
I
I
don't
think it was
remember.
just because it was a short term. It was just a 2-year
2
lease.
years. And by the time when we got to looking for it and I couldn't put my hands on a copy of it, I had a copy unsigned. And that showed that the time was out. So they were nearly done with finishing their hangars. So that's when we went to just doing the ground lease instead of trying to follow up with the signature on the construction.
Right, but you have a copy of what was approved by council in the
Yeah,
minutes. So
yeah,
you
I
do
do
have a
have
copy
that.
of the terms of what the construction lease is.
But it does not refer to the permanent lease.
I don't know that for sure because I don't have a copy in front of me, so I can't really state.
No, I think that's been mentioned. I think it was mentioned only in the meetings, and so it would be in minutes.
So let me see if I can summarize this. On the one side, the board approved certain rates with escalations. On the other side, we sent an old lease to these guys without escalation, which is not signed, but it's kind of like a handshake. Yes, we'll do this when you get it built. I think that's where we are. Letter of law or integrity. I think is where we are. I hate to say it that way, but that's kind of where we are. We screwed up. This is a screw up. Right here. Because the airport sent a lease that is not in compliance with what the board said. So who pays for the screw up? I know when I was in business, I know who paid for the screw up, the one that screwed up. But anyway.
Well, you don't have a meeting of the minds here, obviously, so you don't have an enforceable agreement, nothing signed, so do you go back from scratch and compromise, or do you dig in and say it's a deal killer?
It's tough to be a deal killer when we got, each of us got $250,000 sitting over there. That was the agreement we had when we started, that this was gonna be the lease, the final lease and a construction lease. So in good faith, we started construction to build our hangars over there, knowing this was gonna be the permanent lease. Now that we're done with it, I'm finished, Now we get this new lease that has the escalation process. It bumped up $480 a month or a year. We've agreed to that change in that. That was not shown to us originally as well. So the monetary money has gone up already on a per year basis. Now this new lease additionally gets into 3% on top of that. And that's just, obviously a tough pill to swallow, with both those increases.
I understand what you're saying. Your name, sir?
Mike,
Mike DeWeese. One thing that you said earlier was, if you had been made aware of this would have been something that you would have liked to have negotiated on. So are you saying negotiations are off the table now?
I've got $250,000 sitting over there that you're gonna get 30 years. I think I've kind of paid my 3% up front. I think we just need to go with it. We're already paying more on the land lease rent, and I withdrew when it's started coming to light. I've got a 30-year relationship with you any way I look at it. So I withdrew, changing anything, and we accepted the larger amount. Like I said, this is just kind of kick in the teeth, and he couldn't have put it any more eloquently when he said we had a handshake agreement and someone messed up here and now we're $500,000 into this. So, I'm kind of in a bad position here to negotiate at this point.
Mr. Vice Chairman, Paul, have you calculated what the loss of income will be to the city over if you go back to
No, I
this? Okay. Do either of you, have you calculated what that would
Well,
be?
we haven't,
I think just the
because
change-
just the
$480 a month.
just the money we're paying you for a piece of dirt is all income. And you weren't
Right,
paying-
but do you know how much it is? Just so that the board would have an idea over the life of the lease, what the change would be.
know at the end it is increased to, I think, $6,000 a year. I think
That's almost triples
It almost triples
by the end.
by the end.
just a little under triple by the end.
On land that really weren't getting it, it was a field. There's no income from.
And just to remind the board, you're right, I'm not sure exactly who all was on the board at the time. One of the reasons the city had been working toward and knowing it needed to, we had a subcommittee actually of the authority board to study our lease rates, because it was very clear that lease rates were made and then people would walk away and it would be years and we wouldn't be getting our fair market value. And so we were very concerned about a variety of things, our grants, our FAA looking over our shoulder, aeronautics division looking over our shoulder. And so there was a lot of work put in by members of this authority to come up with that policy. And I think that policy is a sound one. And I like the fact that we have a built-in increase. Hopefully we keep that up. Having said that, I think you also have plenty of evidence in front of you. If you so decide to, in this instance, a waiver of the policy is the best course of action for the city, or maybe a negotiation. I think you have that in front of you.
What's your plan for that? You're gonna sell it?
No, I'm putting all I've got 2 planes in Murfreesboro right now.
Oh, so you're gonna
I
actually
live
use
right
it?
down the street. I live right
Okay,
down
all right.
here.
I just wasn't sure why you built it. Well,
No, it's for me.
it's for you.
We both live in Eagleville.
Right.
We prefer to come down here versus go to Murfreesboro, where our planes are currently.
Way better airport. Ask that guy behind me.
We will be permanent residents.
Yeah.
Okay, I got it.
Was a handshake.
Hmm?
The handshake.
Handshakes.
Yeah, they relied on what they were given at the time. So I'm all for going back and saying, let's waive off of that escalation clause in this instance and make it right with them. We had a handshake deal. That's got to mean something.
Is that a motion?
I do.
Is that a second? Any discussion? All in favor? Aye.
All right.
Opposed?
Thank you very much.
Continue to say good things about this airport.
Yes, yes.
It's Duck River I got a problem. We're getting closer. We've got poles in. We're.
The poles are up. Is that
Yeah,
right?
we got poles and wire.
All
So
right.
we're just trying to get power, but thank you a lot, all of you.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, it's been a long,
I don't guess it's not gonna be attached. I think.
All right, a project funding update. Paul, I think you're going to take us through that.
Yes, and hopefully if I can make this work right, I'm gonna share. Sure. Figure out how to share my screen up here. If not, I think it might just stay and I can do it like this without,
Go ahead.
no, it'll still record. They just won't be able to see it. I was trying to get it to where they could see it on the recording as well. But,
One last thing while you're going to that. Can we put in some quality control, some checks that we don't send out old versions of leases in the future? Because that just costs the city a lot of money because we emailed the wrong one.
and that was us, that's, looking back, I see when and how all that occurred and we had multiple requests all coming in at like every month, it seemed like, and there was actually the 1 month that they weren't in attendance. We even looked back at the attendance records. The 1 month that they weren't there was when, Member
His
McGee,
policy
Member
was
McGee
passed.
came in because we'd had a quick influx of people wanting to come in
And
and
it
try to
took you a
invest.
while to get the final draft of the lease, and it may have been close to his dates that went out.
Okay.
The question I have is when would be our intent to actually execute a lease on this now? Are we going to be moving on that?
Well, they have the lease, so I guess we'll need to update it to take out that escalation clause and get it. Is that it? So it'll have to go to council in September and then council approves it, then I'll get them another lease out. The end of September, right after the council meeting, which is September 12th.
I don't want to speak out of turn. Will they have to have that before they can move in? I guess they will.
I would think so, yeah.
I would think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, they don't want them in there for insurance purposes without a signed lease.
All right, look at that. Maybe we'll see if that records. So one of the things that, what I wanted to go over with this, and again, as I mentioned before, you're kind of a guinea pig through this project because you're much more aware of what's going on here than in the city council. City council's got an entire city to worry about, so they rely on authorities and other boards to give them the details. So that's kind of where we are now is in that process. So hopefully that little guy right there is not going to be an issue. So tuck him over. So what we've actually received with that $6 million is under a community funding or community project funding grant from Scott Davis. I'll get it to the. There we go. So as you can see, we brought this to you back in April of 23. And what was brought in originally, the reason why, and another reason why we're having to do this workshop is because it was originally presented in support of an application by MTSU through Scott Daserlay's office. And as you can see, the way the minutes read, we supported here through the authority an $8.9 million request from MTSU to the Scott Daserlay's office. Because of the way those are established, they're looking for the sponsor. They can't, an entity just can't come in without the sponsor's approval and request to do something on their airport. It's presented to the city council. The city council through resolution approved support of that application. And one of the things you see on the very bottom sentence there, and the way it was presented, and the way it was intended, the intent of the project was there was no local share. Local share was to be covered for any of those improvements were to be covered by MTSU. Well, because of the way the money, as has been discussed here, the way the money was approved by Daserlay's office Didn't work out that way. He chose money from a different pot. He chose money from Department of Transportation. And it came through House appropriations from the 2024 House bill. There's a link to the proper, and this is really all we got. We kept looking for, as some people joke, we're looking for the big check so they could show this is what I've done for you. We didn't get that. We just, our line item on that spreadsheet, and that's it. As a matter of fact, our consultant pointed it out to me. I didn't even know about it. Nobody, and finally MTSU was told about it because they had applied for it, and that we'd received $6 million, or there had been $6 million from Scott Desjardins of the 8.9 request. All he approved, or all that the House Appropriations Committee approved, was $6 million of the 8.9. As it was listed, it's listed as a grant and aid for airports or Shelbyville Municipal Airport at Bomar Field. It was all it's listed for. You can see down through the rest of the list, or some of these are it's a little hard to read because of the way that it came to me, but some of them are for, terminal repairs. Some of like there's one with a runway extension. Ours was listed just for Bomar Field. So that makes it broad for our use. But what it does do, because it came from the Department of Transportation, it has all of the handcuffs, all of the grant assurances, has all of the requirements from FAA, because they're the ones that administer airport funds for the Department of Transportation. It comes with all their strings. Only thing it doesn't come with is justification. With everything, every money that FAA spends, you have to justify it. You have to show proof that you need it. Same thing we're doing right now for the air traffic control towers. Matter of fact, we're going through that process. Same thing for a runway extension, as a matter of fact. If you want to use federal money on a runway extension, you have to show that you have over 500 operations of a particular aircraft that needs that runway extension. Or you have the support from an organization or multiple organizations saying that if you had this length of runway, we would land at your airport. You have to show that kind of justification to FAA. Well, with these in-kind support like this, you don't have to have that type of justification. But again, like I said, that comes with the strings. And part of that is the fact that it has to be used for Bomar Field in total. It has to be used for the benefit of everybody on the airport. So we've discussed things with MTSU. We've met with MTSU. We've met with Aeronautics and MTSU because of the way the state of Tennessee is set up through their aeronautics division. They are what's called a block grant state. Before that, they're a channeling state. So basically everything is established. Any federal funds is administered through Aeronautics. So they're the authority in Tennessee, even though it's a federal grant. They're the ones that give you the guidance. They're the ones that passes the check they get a check from FAA for that dollar amount. And then in turn, they give us a check to the fact of a grant. With that, we discussed with MTSU, we went through and the state of Tennessee explained to MTSU that we really can't use it on their leased property because of those strings. It has to be on the property as a whole. Same thing I could not use it to build the ramp or the taxiway to Deweese's hangar and Mr. Quigley's hangar. I couldn't have done that with that money either. Same kind of concept. They're a tenant on the airport. Now there might be a primary user, but they're a tenant on the airport. I could not build a ramp for Charles. He came in and asked for a $500,000 ramp the other day. I can't build it for him with that money. Now what I could do is extend my general ramp, and if it connects to his taxiway, good for him. And he would merge on top of it and be able to utilize it. But everybody else could too. It wouldn't be limited just to Charles. So that's part of the situation. So in discussions with Doug and some of his other counterparts there at MTSU, we came up with some programs and some different projects that we think that would help everybody as a whole, but also help MTSU. And the first one was one that we would not be doing if it weren't for MTSU. But it not only helps MTSU, but it helps MTSU's traffic work well with our traffic, with the itinerant traffic that comes in and the base aircraft that comes in. You see these at other airports. You see them. Murfreesboro's got a smaller version of it, but as a matter of fact, in the design phase of what David's building right now, he's building an area on the ramp that's an acre and a half of just run-up area so that they can have as many airplanes ready to go. As soon as they leave the ramp, they're ready to go. Well, that's on the far end. This is a project on the north end that is designed to allow for the bypass of, or the holding, whatever the necessity is. It allows, it's being designed. This is not to scale. This is just a general idea that Matt was whipped up something quick for me to put on the presentation, but this is the same basic concept so that anybody that's either on hold for instrument approach or for some reason still needs to do some run up, or the instructor needs to go over something with a student, or if there's an engine issue or something like that. And this works not only for, that's the thing, is it not works only for MTSU. Now we're taking in consideration that for the most part, our separations are designed for a DA40, but you know, the footprint of a DA40 also works for the RV12.
Yeah.
So, you know, it works for our guys. It works for a Cessna 172, which is, you know, the Tennessee flight trainings. So it works for those guys as well, but it also will have room for, you know, if we've got somebody else that needs to pull over, like even if our base customers have an issue, or if they're on instrument hold, they can pull over to the side and wait for release and somebody else can go around. That type scenario. So it will be big enough. We will be looking to see what the grounds can support and then also look at that. So that's one of the things, that's one of the projects that we're looking at to spend that $6 million for. The next one is one that's been sorely needed here for quite some time that we've been just talking about, is a taxiway that we've already actually spent money on design for this through other grants. So the design for that's ready. The design for the previous one is not. It will have to be designed from scratch. So that's going to be kind of the holdup. That's the one that's going to slow the process somewhat for receiving the money from FAA and the state. So this particular taxiway will not only open up 10 acres for view, but it'll bring an area down for where you see that down at the very bottom, you see it says future aviation development along taxi. That is where we've talked with the DC3 about their permanent home being. They've been raising money for a while. They hope to be able to use some other political influence to be able to raise some more money to be able to open up a hangar and museum. So what that does is the taxiway to open up for us to build one other thing that we want to build. That taxiway itself is, we'll review some numbers here in a little bit, but that's a pretty decent little amount for us right now. But the other thing is for the city and for others that will be open for lease for all parties and for anybody that comes through as a corporate hangar. And that's been on our list for quite some time. We have, as a matter of fact, we have a waiting list for this hangar right now, just because it was mentioned. Not sure exactly how many years ago it was mentioned, but we had the money set aside at the city before. For those that can remember that were on the board at that time, we had the money set aside. That money was since used to purchase land that MTSU is leasing now. But with that, this would be built out as a 100 by 120 hangar, be 100 feet deep, 120 feet wide, allow for some, this is just sort of a quick mock-up of the general idea so you can get a concept of what it is. There'll be office space in the back a little bit, just for, not only restrooms, but also a little, maybe meeting space for if people need it or anything like that, storage, things of that nature for those different airplanes that might need some storage. Because some airplanes like that rely on us to move their airplanes. Some of them would want to have their own things and their own equipment in there to move. So that would be something that would be leased by the square foot, and it would be generally designed, and the door size and things are designed for jet traffic. So those are mainly for your larger jets, like your larger citations, your bigger stuff. Right now, the waiting list has 2 citations on the waiting list. There's a company out of Smyrna that wants to relocate here as soon as we can get that built. But it also does one other thing that we, as you can see, the smaller hangars on the right-hand side, those are, we have a maintenance shop, a turbine maintenance shop that wants to locate here. They've been trying to get here for quite some time. They've been patient waiting on us. I keep telling them there's a taxiway coming. Look, there's a design. Come on. I keep in contact with them, just saying it's coming, it's coming. Well, now it's finally coming. And so they're waiting on us, and they'll be starting building they'll be coming before you before too long. When they can start seeing dirt move, they'll come before you to request leasing that space. They're trying to figure out how big a space they want. As a matter of fact, we're kind of limited on the depth because of the way it's laid out. They can only get about 80 feet deep. So they're looking at possibly building 2 hangars and putting something between the two, like office space between the two, something like that. There's different discussions. We hope it all pans out. That'll be the next thing that'll come about from that. And then moving forward, one of the last projects is the terminal building. This is, we've tried to go through bipartisan infrastructure law. We're still trying that too. That's still, like I said, I'm trying every avenue for any kind of grant we can get. But this is mainly to update this terminal building from 1967, but also to accomplish ADA standards. So what it does, the reason why you're seeing a front facade, because we got to add an elevator to the terminal. And with that in the front, we figured out through design and concepts and things like that to add the elevator to the front of the building so that we can keep the terminal building open and functional while the construction goes on. And what it will do is we'll add square footage upstairs, but not much. It'll add some square footage in the back and in the front. It won't add anything to the width. But what it will do is make upstairs ADA compliant, which will open it up to all people. It'll open up to some of the things that we've talked about with the, flight schools, meeting space such as this, so that people aren't having to sit in the balconies like Mary Kay over there in the balcony. So we're not, we'll have space, meeting space that can handle larger meetings up to 24 people in classroom style, but also lecture style. You can have it even larger than that if you wanted to. Joint space in the middle. You can have it for future pop-up weddings, because there will be a nice, there's a covered area off the back where people will be able to not only all glass, but they'll be able to step out back and watch airplanes. They'll be able to step up there.
Vivian wants a bigger kitchen.
And you can see in the left, tucked in the back corner, what used to be upstairs, the laundry room, will have a small kitchenette type setup for, any type of service upstairs and things like that. So if other people lease the space, they'll be able to, it'd be open for lease. It'd be open for, if somebody wants to have a meeting. We don't have to necessarily lease it, but we can have that capability of leasing space for people in this area, because there's not really any place at this end unless you go to Uncle Nearest. And if some of you guys have been to meetings there, they've got a beautiful meeting area. But it'd be nice for the city to be able to offer something like that as well. Because of the fact that I've been to a lot of meetings with it, that you can sit out and they'll have a whole back glass that's across the bottom. You can see where the glass will go all the way across from one side to the other. I know that some of the guys upstairs have a hard time focusing sometimes because they're looking out the windows, because I see video clips where they've taken shots out the window where they've been watching airplanes. But that's the same idea, is that you'll have glass go all the way across the back that they'll be able to see from, but then they'll also be able to step out undercover like that and be able to step out. And you can actually from up there be able to see from one end to the other. You'll be able to see all the approaches. You'll be able to see the whole thing. But what it does is it does open the bottom. Believe it or not, you would think there'd be plenty of room for an ADA entrance in the bottom, but there's not. So when that cover will allow for us to bump out far enough to be able to have assisted entry in the rear, so that we have ADA compliant in the rear. The front facade will change so that we have assisted entry in the front. But as soon as they come in, they'll be able to turn to the right for an elevator that'll get you up to ADA for upstairs as well. They will also provide for upstairs, can provide a after hour service so that people can log, because the door will still remain on the right hand side that's up there now, to and allow them to have access after hours with the remote through keypad and things of that nature, to be able to, so that we don't have to. Right now, if somebody needs in the terminal building after hours, they pay an after hours fee for us, our staff, to come. Now they'd be able to have access to a toilet, be able to access to things after hours. They'll be able to have a couch to wait. Like right now, when we have people that come in we have one gentleman, I don't know if he just doesn't like the hotels here or what, but he comes in on a regular basis to see his daughter ride, and he flies in and gets here like at 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock. And then he flies back. His guys are waiting on him until 11:30, depends on if she wins or not sometimes too. 11:30 at night. And then he flies back to North Atlanta. And so that he can sleep at home, I guess. But those guys would be able to stay upstairs and not have to rely on our staff waiting on in there, and our guys awkwardly looking at them over the counter, just sitting there waiting. That's all they're doing, because we've already serviced the aircraft before that. But that gives you a general overview of the main projects, but one of the things that you'll see when we go over these dollar amounts, these are the different estimates, and they're, as you can see, very, very round numbers. They're there, so you can kind of see that the aircraft run-up area, just because of just quick numbers, is $700,000. That's the reason why I knew when Charles said that he wanted a ramp, it didn't take anything to know that it was $500,000 ramp that he was asking for. You're looking at about $85,000 in addition to that, just for the engineering to get that designed and ready to go to bid. Again, we could find, we could be way off on those numbers. It seems like now you just drop it. You just somebody's throwing a dart at a board. It seems like sometimes on some of these numbers. Midfield taxiway, that has actually been designed, that they have gotten good numbers, but those are timed numbers. So those numbers were done how long ago, Matt? Pushing
2 years ago.
Yeah, so, so all we could do was give a little percentage increase is what we did. So those numbers again could increase for that midfield taxiway. But at least that's farther down the road. So those are ready within, a few pages of having designed ready. Same thing for the corporate hangar. Corporate hangars, we got a grant that's already paid for the design of the site prep and the design of that hangar from another grant. So we're able to spend the money just on that hangar, on the sticks themselves or the metal. And so that an estimate of about $2 million based on some numbers that Matt had given us for a similar per square foot price. And we are not building it out anything crazy. So we're keeping it fairly simple so that we can get the biggest thing we can get for the money. Then we go to the upstairs and then the downstairs portion. The upstairs portion is the ADA remodel. We're looking at a $1.2 million remodel because the elevator, and people have scared me about how long it takes just to get an elevator. But when we first started talking about it, it was about $50,000 a stop. Now it's about $150,000 a stop just for the elevator and some of the other things that we have to do. And then you have engineering and architectural fees associated with that, about $100,000. The balance you see across the bottom is, when you were trying to park out here today, it kind of shows that we need to do an addition to the parking lot. That is to be across from existing enterprise parking, and that will be mainly for enterprise parking. The idea is for their customers, their cars, to be able to open up our parking here for us. And the idea for that is it can stand for overflow for us as well. But that dollar amount will fluctuate because the parking lot will be designed to be expanded, because we're going to be, as I point out here in a little bit, playing with numbers at the end. So that parking lot could end up being one row if we've used all the numbers elsewhere, or the parking lot could end up having enough to handle, 30 to 50 cars, which it doesn't take long for us to fill that up around here. It's surprising, but it does work out that way. Because of what, as you probably noticed, if you're quick at math and did the math down through there, you'll see that it does not equal $6 million. There's still about $500,000 in there to play with because of knowing that we're missing numbers. We know that when we get in there, there'll be additional here, additional there, or we'll get out there at the taxiway and find that the ground needs some more work here or something like that. So there's a lot of unknowns that we have to hit with. About the only one that's pretty good is the construction of the hangar. The upstairs, I trimmed it to get to that number. So we could get into even more and more if we start trying to do things with the remodel portion of it, the design, because there's some things downstairs that are needed as well, such as you're feeling right now, the temperature in this room is part of it. This space was converted from an old garage. And so this spot with an update to an HVAC system needs to be done and all kinds of different things as well. So we go over this. This is sort of the funding breakdown. The $6 million is, of course, that grant and aid for the airports. That under Department of Transportation, one of the strings that are attached to that is the fact that you have to have a local, they require you to have some skin in the game, which is 10%. 10% is local share. Because of, as it was alluded to, because of the aeronautics budget being trimmed, other people going out for other grants, they have developed a policy under TDOT that they will not match set-asides. Because they've been getting set-asides and when they go to aeronautics and just assume that they're going to match it, all of a sudden they lose 600, in our case, they might lose $350,000. They might lose another $1 million here that Jackson's trying to get a runway done right now. And so there's, it could all of a sudden they go to them and say, I need I need my 5% of, $30 million runway project. So that's kind of stuff is they've made it to where there's no state support on match or set asides. However, so I'll get that to the local share for us to get the full benefit of $6 million is $600,000. So we would be going to the city council asking for $600,000 to match that to get the full benefit. One of the things that aeronautics has thrown us is, if you want to call it, thrown us a bone on, they've tried to help us out with, is a terminal project. There is a program that's been around for quite some time, as a matter of fact, with aeronautics, is that they offer a one-time terminal construction or remodel project. Like, for example, Murfreesboro, for those of you who might have flown in, I know Doug's familiar with it. The terminal at Murfreesboro, they received a grant from the state that it was just a drop in the bucket for that terminal, but they did receive $500,000 in that grant. It is a 50-50 split. So for you to get the full amount or the full effect of that grant, you have to spend $1 million, which for us is not a problem. One of the things the reason why it's out there is that because with this scenario, the city can utilize that federal grant as our local share. That's where that's some of the discussion that came around from this table discussions and things like that we can utilize that, which in turn, if you start putting the numbers together, that can, in a way, through a reimbursement grant of that $500,000, basically takes your local share down to $100,000. So you're getting $6.6 million worth of work done for $100,000 of local money. I haven't done the percentages on it, but that's pretty good percent. And that's one of the things that wanted to go over that with the city. The reason why, because there's a lot of moving parts. I'm making sure I'm gonna sit on the other side from Kay, because Kay's gonna be kicking me under the table because of the fact that we're gonna be going from grants of different forms and different fashions. The grants themselves will be from FAA will probably be a couple of different grants that will have to be monitored and go through. There are certain things that upstairs even that FAA can't or will not participate in because there are certain areas that are not eligible. Like, for example, one spot's marked as office space and one spot's marked as testing center, they will not participate in that. That's ineligible for federal funds. But they are eligible for state funds. So the terminal project, when it comes to project administration, that's part of the reason why you see $100,000 project for engineers and architects, because that project administration for that one's going to be very entertaining, because we'll have to charge one grant for certain items upstairs. Certain items will go through that grant. And so I've been nervous as to how to present that to Kay, because it's going to be, like I said, we're going to have state grants, we're going to have federal grants, but it is in the thing. And the fun part for Kay as well is I've got 3 other requests that are in with the state right now, with other projects that are going right now as well. So even all the way down to a simple maintenance grant of $15,000. So every time I mention the word grant, she just rolls her eyes at me. Lisa messed up and called it a $6 million grant. The $6 million grants the other day, and I was.
It said $6 million.
Instead of $6 million, she said
We got
$6 million.
$6 million grants.
And so I was afraid Kay was really going to come after me. But that's kind of the general breakdown, kind of the general idea. Hoping that helps clarify some things for the council, and that the timing is the other thing that we'll be working on, some of the information for as far as that's concerned, because it will cross, another thing Kay's going to love, it will cross fiscal years. that 500,000, as a matter of fact, the $500,000 is not even, would not be available until FY 25. There's going to be some items that will have to be done up front that will have to go through a reimbursable. So there are some items up front that will have to go to council. And we hope to, over the next, we've started some environmental work. I hope to be bringing things to you in the near future. I've got somewhat of a layout of some of the ideas that I hope to be able to flesh out here shortly, but we have, like I said, some of the taxiway and some of the hangars, that's, the design's already done. So all it's going to take is some simple finalizing of pages and things like that to get it ready for bid. It's the other run-up area, the design, they hope to have it done somewhere in October timeframe is the idea. If we can get things moving, but we have to get proper agreements taken care of and some other things, environmental. It's the thing is all they're doing is getting it ready for the street, because as far as the asphalt projects, there's nothing we can do really until the new season starts, the new construction season starts. So what we're trying to do is get the stuff in front of contractors so that they know it's out there, but it'll still have to wait before they go out for bid. Now, that's a lot of information. I've been trying to put it in there. Yes, sir.
Got 4.
Okay.
Good. What else is on your wish list that you didn't include?
As far as my ACIP, I have, one of the things that we've recently just put in through was shade ports. So that's one of the things that is on there. Also utility development for, because right now that taxiway, after it gets built, it's sort of like the schools we have here in Bedford County. As soon as they're built, they're too small. Same thing, that taxiway, as soon as it gets finished, it's going to be too small. So my next wish list will be to extend that taxiway to have it turn south and be able to open up for some more hangar development in that area. I need ramp space here and ramp space that direction. So that's other things that are on my wish list as well. But the next thing, and I'm hoping if there's money available, I've been and trying to figure out ways to do site prep. As if we alluded back to the drawing before, there were 2 hangars side by side over there. So the next thing is, and has been discussed, is that with the city, was that as soon as one has tenants and it's full, to start construction on a second. So
But you
those
prioritized your wish
Yes.
list, and so this is your number 1.
these are my number ones, or this taxiway really has been my number one for quite some time.
Okay.
So that I can get access to that peak, because we're done with the developed property for the most part. I've got 2 spots that I can potentially squeeze some hangars in that I've been showing to some people, but even that's kind of limited. So I really need to be able to open up that 10 acres. This is the next thing.
A suggestion is that when you talk to the city council, don't go in and say, I need 600,000, I need 100,000. Say, I need 100,000, and in return, I'm gonna have a corporate hangar that's going to generate X rent a year.
Okay.
And these other hangars that are going to, and your return on investment is going to be 68% or whatever it is. So it becomes a very good investment instead of a cost. As a suggestion.
Yeah, sure.
Because I think that's what's happened, is what you told us. You've got
Yes.
a waiting list.
Yeah, we talked about that last time on the
Yes,
shade ports
yes.
with the amount in a year, it's basically paid for the local share.
Then the other would be, if you've got this run-up area that's going to benefit certain people behind me. Do they feel like they would like to contribute to some extent to the run-up area?
I can't answer that for them, but I can tell you what they have current design that has their money has fallen short on. They're about $25 million short of what they want right now. So I think it would probably be a difficult ask for them to come back and say, can you give money towards that? Because they're already saying that we're renting property from you right now that we don't have anything on. They're renting in 2 different spots.
That's their choice. That wasn't our choice. That was their choice.
Sure, but I'm just
That's the one they
throwing
signed the
that out there.
Yeah.
I think the run-up area benefits the other customers more,
Oh, does it?
not MTSU. MTSU and smaller customers are gonna be running up, so if the jet's there, he can take off. He can go
Okay.
past them.
There is
So
one,
it's not for,
Okay.
it's for them being courteous Didn't have to wait for those to not have to wait.
Got it. Okay.
So that's, and in particular, there's one particular council member that did bring that up before. That was a concern from day one with him when this first came up, because he just happens to have an airplane here. So it was a concern of his. And so that's something that, that it can be brought out even more.
Anything else? Anyone?
Can I ask a quick question? When you,
Sure.
that maintenance facility, is that aircraft maintenance?
Yes, and primarily for turbine, but also I'm sure that they'll
So they will,
get some.
but it'll be a separate from the existing maintenance.
It will be existing ground lease that will be coming to the authority, and yes, it will be an independent company.
Anything else on the funding up there? And shall we go to a perennial topic? The Azura lease.
So, again, this is on here so that we can address some of the things that was presented last month, just to, because there's a quick domino effect associated with that piece of property. And assuming everything goes as planned, no special weather or whatever statements, the property closing date is set for the 29th of August. Is that correct? As far as I know, that hasn't changed.
As long as they sign it, the closing documents are on their way to Kentucky for the seller. Of course, we've been waiting on them for over a year, so
Okay.
let's hope they sign.
So with that piece, we would need to be able to lease it to Azure so that they can, first thing, strip about 5,000 or something like that, cubic yards of material that they need to be able to fill in. And once that's complete, then about 60 days later, they think they can be completed with the ramp. And then they'll be working on the facilities, and then MTSU will start figuring out what they can do with it after that. But then in turn with that piece of property will be turned into a parking lot.
Yeah.
For MTSU. So the lease is here so that we can sort of speed the process up. Now, this would, anything that we approve, any terms, you can bring the terms that you guys have had a chance to think about or look at from last month, and we'll be able to take it to legal so that they can present something, because I know Azure, because of who their sub is and things like that, they have to jump through quite a few hoops as well, as far as not only their legal department, but then because they'll be leasing that piece to MTSU, they'll have quite a few hoops to go through. So we just need to go up, start the process. I think Ginger's been able to figure out a way for the city to give permission for Azure to go ahead and start digging. If everything goes as planned. Again, like I said, it's a domino effect. As soon as the ink dries, it'll be a quick domino. Will start falling. But so we're trying not to hold up the construction. But again, we just know that based on past experience with different leases that has MTSU involved in it, there's a lot of ABC agencies that like to have their voice on those leases.
Paul, I didn't say, did you put a clause add into this draft about taking the soil off the property?
No.
Okay, that we probably need
We
to
just
add
wanted it as
that.
an intended use. The
Huh.
intended use was just going to be for automobile parking was the idea, but yeah, that was something that.
We need to
definitely-
put that in there,
Okay.
because that will give them permission. I mean, councils will have to approve them taking that off the
We're
land
moving it. We're not taking it off site. I mean, it's just being relocated.
to a
What
different
it's
part.
doing is it's really adding value to that property, because now it's all on grade. So it will be an existing grade with all of the rest of the property too. where
We
it's
just
kind
need
of
to put that in there.
usable. Hangar now, whatever.
So what are you?
And then what are the terms?
That's what I'm asking for.
Because I see you,
That's what I'm asking for it currently,
the amount that you have dropped in, is that based on our
that's
35 or is that?
I put in, yes, that's based on the 30, which was, I think, I put 19 and something.
Mhm.
Somewhere in my stack, there it is. 19,965.75 for that piece.
It's based on
But that's based on that 35 cents a square foot for aeronautical land. Now that's up to you. If you want to adjust that, change that, if you want to increase it, this is a short-term lease compared to a long-term lease. This is in discussion with Azure. They seem to be happy with the idea of the concept of about a 4-year plan. Might ask MTSU that too, to see, but know that they'll lose their parking for 4 years if they don't have their main hub built or their school built. The students won't be able to park there after 4 years.
So we would need to
But
change.
it could have the possibility of a, I guess we would leave that out there as a possibility that we can always add to that if we needed to, the long term. They hope we don't. I know Doug does, definitely. Hope it doesn't take 4 years for them to get on, quit parking there and be on the main ramp.
Do we have a lease?
We have a lease.
Do we have a lease?
There was a sample that was altered based on existing leases that we have.
I don't have a copy of the lease. And at the last meeting, Kelly asked that he wanted time to review the lease.
Mhm.
And to my knowledge, we've never got.
There was a hard copy in your packet last week.
No, I don't think so.
It was just a draft, wasn't it?
Yes, it was
Wasn't
just a
It was
draft.
just a draft. It was not anything that had been.
Yeah, there's nothing that was
the purpose
official.
For us to just come back and discuss. That was my understanding.
Yes, and just discuss and mark through and give the terms
Did
so
you get
that,
it?
so that the terms, so that the legal department can do their part.
Kelly, did you get it?
It wasn't in the
Day before
packet, that
yesterday.
Lisa,
Yeah.
it wasn't in what you sent out. I don't believe so.
No.
I
think
received a
it-
copy
it was
from you a couple of
We-
weeks ago,
I
Lisa
think
and I
we
did.
received that email before our July
Separately.
meeting.
I'm,
It was a
I think-
sample of an Azure lease that we
Yeah.
received before our July.
I think that's what Paul's talking about. Before the July meeting, when I sent the July packet out, it had a sample of the lease in it for the July meeting. And then y'all wanted to review it. Now, Brian did ask me to send him a copy of the current Azure lease because he didn't have that because he was a new member, and I did send him that
Okay.
of the
That's-
current Azure lease.
That would
But
run completely separate because that's a long-term lease. We don't want this to be long-term.
And what we would like for you to consider is right now, it is gonna be a parking lot, and we're gonna put a substantial amount of money into that for a 4-year.
Yeah.
Investment in that, so it's not airfield property, it's the other part is, so if you look at it, it's up on the hill, we're gonna have a lot of
Vivian,
investment.
You can
into
make
the
copies for
parking lot,
the.
which eventually could be used for hangar development later on, because it will be great. So that, might be take that into consideration.
Because the existing rate of 35 cents, that was.
Airfield.
That's,
That's
Yes, that's-
airfield.
or in the case, if you've heard us say referenced aeronautical versus non-aeronautical.
Yeah.
That's aeronautical rate is 35 cents. And when you start saying non-aeronautical, that's what he's arguing, because some people on non-aeronautical, you start linking into what the rates are like in town, what the rates are like, across the street, different things of that nature.
So you already checked all that out, right? I mean, you came up with that number,
The non-aeronautical or the aeronautical?
either.
I went with in discussion, in looking at it, I did look at it as being on the aeronautical side because we will eventually be using it for aeronautical purposes. Eventually, right now, we still can get away with it being, because there is no grant assurances associated with it or anything like that, because for one thing, we don't own it, but as soon as we do, it's still in the county. It had to be zoned differently, and it would have to be turned over to the airport. And it can be in turn turned over to the airport 4 years from now. It's not an issue because they're not getting an airplane on and off. So we can establish whatever we want to as a rate. I was sort of with David's idea that they're going to improve it. They're going to flatten it out. And as you alluded to before, it might make a good idea just to go ahead and put plane ports or shade ports on top of it, of a paved surface. And it would be, a lot of that would already be taken care of.
So Paul, you don't want it turned over to the airport as soon as it comes, as the city buys it?
Well, we'll just have to look at it. We'll make sure on that there's no issues with that piece. Right now, you can't get an airplane back and forth, so it's not really that big of an issue. I just want to make
Because our
sure.
lease would be different. It'd just be with the city. We would not use the authority.
I'll have to double check that. I have put the request in with aeronautics to confirm that, and I have not received a
Okay.
response yet because I'm asking for something that's not in their
in their
It's-
wheelhouse on.
Well, it's not a daily kind of
Right,
something they see on a
request.
regular basis, so they have to go through the federal guidelines and confirm it.
Okay.
So do you have a recommendation of what we do?
I'd see no problem with that 35 cents a square foot. And
Staying with what we established.
what's established as aeronautical, and now it's up to you. I guess the next question would be, do you want to do an annual increase or not?
Well, I think that's what the rates were set by a previous board, correct?
Yeah.
That we
That's-
would have a
That was pre-
35%, 35 per square foot with a built-in escalation clause of 3% annually. Is that only applied to long-term leases? Is that what you're saying? Or is that applied to all leases? Because if it is, those are the rates, and we would need to, in my opinion, amend those if we want to, those are the rates that have been adopted first.
We don't have a lease that's like this, really. For example, we don't have a pigeonhole lease just like this. We've never done one like this before, really. It is raw land, so you can look at that aspect, but he's not building a hangar on it, so that doesn't meet the criteria. So when we get it, yes, I'm sure we get improved land, but we don't get a hangar that's already built on it. So it's a little different. Other raw land that we have that's not aeronautical, we send it out for bid and it gets put out for bid for agricultural purposes. So again, this is something that's it's just a little different enough.
You don't think the 3% should apply to this time?
That's up to you. I think that we have the 3% is in the
Long-term.
other two leases, the other two long-term leases that we have, the 3% is in there. That we have with MTSU and Azure, the 3% is in there. So I don't foresee that it would not faze me at all. It looks to me like it should be in there. Will it hurt my feelings one way or the other if it's not in there? No, it won't. But it's because it is just over a 4-year period of time. That's not much of an increase over 4 years for just a 3% a year.
So if I may, to address Member Cruz's question, I think we do need to look at the policy. I don't recall there being a provision that distinguished between long-term and short-term leases. We would need to look exactly what was passed by the board at that time. That doesn't mean that you can't make an exception, but of course, I would always want you to be very clear in your minutes, in your vote, why you were making a distinction away from the policy.
The other distinction is aeronautical versus non-aeronautical.
Correct.
Since it's not.
This is not aeronautical today.
And it
Or
won't
improved.
it will not be, for my purposes and my description, it's not aeronautical for me until I can get an airplane on and off the market.
We're gonna spend the money to make yourself
Right.
that way, so that's why I was thinking someone under 25 cents is what I was thinking for parking lot.
So what is 10 cents? 10 cents difference, how much is it? Well, it's what, 45,000,
44, yeah,
and
1.5, so you're looking about.
so call it 60,000, 600,000 square feet,
6,000.
$6,000.
Mr. Vice Chair, but
Please.
maybe, just reading from the minutes of October 14th, 2021. There was a lot of discussion. I won't read all that, but the actual vote was a motion made to leave the construction rate at 30 cents a square foot, the permanent ground lease rate at 35 cents a square foot, with a built-in escalation clause of 3% annually, with a term of 20 years, with a 5-year renewal and 5 one-year renewals that could opt in. So that's what the actual vote was. And so those were specifically adopted for 20-year leases, permanent ground leases. And most of that, of course, is going to be with your a hangar or something being built. So that policy seems to be specifically not addressed to this situation. Thank you, Lisa.
But put it in perspective, we're talking about $25,000 tons of truck. Davis.
So you're looking-
Discussion?
I mean, did I hear David asking for a reduction from the 35 cents? Is that what I heard?
Yeah, he said he was thinking 25 cents. Was more than what-
So
For
you're,
a parking lot.
so you're looking at, an annual reduction of $5,699.25.
I mean, we're gonna put a lot of, and we're gonna leave that for 4 years. So I mean, we're not, it's not like we got a long time to use it. And we're putting a lot of, the lighting in there, roads to it. So, I mean, we're gonna walk away from it with that.
So you're looking at, that would be an annual lease rate of $14,265.90.
Yeah, 1.2 acres,
1.31,
1.31.
turns out to a little over 57,000 square feet.
You say you're bringing it up to grade?
Down to grade.
All right, but then what are you putting on what's the surface gonna be like?
It's gonna be stone and the road will go into it and it'll have, curve all the way around it to be paved all the way in front going up to the area that we have leased for long term.
I say do it. And give them a reduced rate if he's making all those improvements.
Yeah, it's gonna have lights. I mean, it'll be fully lit, crosswalk going
Yeah,
to it.
yeah, it's a good deal.
Any increase, decrease, or set it as that one rate and leave it as is?
Is it somewhere gonna be in writing what all you're doing?
Yes, it's on the plan. I'll have the copy of it.
They have to, the site plan was drawn for a little bit bigger footprint than what we actually will be available at 1.3, but it will be very similar. They'll have to, small adjustments here and there.
Kelly, you're suggesting
25 is what he's wanting. He's, yeah,
flat or with an escalation?
with all what he's putting in there. That's what I'm talking about.
For 4 years.
That's what's before us right now.
4 years, is that what you want?
Roughly.
Is that
yeah,
what's
we
going
think
on?
4 years.
Yeah.
Whenever they finish the big project, they'll, their parking lot over there, and we'll no longer need this.
And aren't we gonna get an update on MTSU's progress today?
Yes.
So 4 years, whether you, the discussion right now is at 25. And then I guess whether you want an escalation clause.
I move we forget the escalation clause and take it at 25.
Got a motion. Was there a second?
Second.
Second. Any further discussion?
Just to clarify the motion, please, that's 25 cents per square yard, square foot, no escalation clause in 4 years, Ms. Wilson.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And we will be attaching, of course, we talk about an exhibit A in here anyway about what the actual premises are, but we will add in specifically as an obligation of them exactly what their plans are for both the leveling and all that.
There was talk about wanting to get started on this right away, but are we talking about right away before this is executed? Or have we learned that we need to start getting executed contracts done before we start allowing people to do things?
My position is that it shouldn't happen, but I know there's a lot of pressure. I've received calls from state representatives about this, so. Yeah, and I'm like, they wanted to do it before closing, and I was like, you're gonna mess with our title insurance if you start messing with that, so nothing's gonna happen before next Thursday. Really, technically, the council has to approve that.
So it would,
This is when nobody likes me.
so the idea, in my impression, because of what I alluded to before, any lease that seems like that, especially when we know that it will be subleased to MTSU, there will be quite a few extra people that take extra eyes on that lease. So the faster we can get it in the process and in the queue, the better. But I think that Ginger has been able to find a way for them to have access to, at least to the dirt. I mean, for construction, but it does mean have access to the dirt, which is what is one of the biggest things that's holding up the process. So I think that, does that sound, am I speaking?
No, I mean, if they had gotten permission from, And that was the whole thing. It was gonna mess with our title insurance to
No,
even
I'm saying
before closing.
After,
Well, after we close, I
Yes,
mean,
that's what I meant. I'm sorry, nothing until after the closing. Yeah.
I will defer to the city manager if he wishes to allow that to happen. Technically, council needs to approve that. But if we can get council to approve the lease in September, I mean, it's just is what it is.
Well, once we own the property, I don't see an issue with moving dirt. And I don't think council will. And then
Probably
we
not.
can formally approve the lease at September 12th.
Mhm.
Lisa.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, so there's a motion on the floor, seconded to approve a lease 4 years, 25 cents, no escalation.
So does there need to be any pending approval from
Hmm?
pending the closure of the property or anything like that need to be added to the motion, just out of curiosity? So we can't lease something we don't have. Okay, all right.
We're fine.
Okay, any further
We know
discussion?
that second one.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes. Okay, I think that was all of our new business. Can we go into an update from MTSU?
Well, I've sort of opened that up there for the guys behind, and then I'll add a little something that I've heard just here and there on some different things. But is there anything that you guys would like to throw out there, or anything you'd like to discuss? I know I'm sort of throwing you out there cold.
I didn't know.
Cold, I mean, I can talk first while you think of something to say.
No, I can give you a quick update on where we are to this point. As Paul alluded to earlier, we did come up against a significant shortfall from what we had hoped to do in this first phase of construction, and that caused us to kind of go back to the drawing board and take our maintenance management or our program that trains A&P mechanics out of the first phase of this move. The university intends to seek additional money. I cannot speak on that. I'm not privy to that information. I can only tell you from the airport and the flight training side, provided that everything gets to move forward here has been discussed today, our plan is to begin limited operations in the spring of 25. I'm probably looking at a dozen airplanes. It's about a quarter of our fleet. 100 instructors, I'm sorry, 100 students, 25 or so instructors. So that probably won't be a significant departure from how much you see us out here today. Because as we start to move operations down here, we'll start to take some of the existing in-flight training operations and move them away from this airport and continue to do that over the next few years as we grow the program. And hopefully by the fall of 27, if we can keep on our current schedule, which is a pretty big if, we will be done with our phase 1 construction, and all of the flight operations will depart Murfreesboro and relocate here to Shelbyville.
Since I put Doug on the spot, Matt, you got any on the environmental, on the land itself and some things like that? I know we have a TDOT meeting coming up. Are you familiar with that? I'll let you know about that here in just a minute. Go
Okay.
ahead.
Not familiar with that. So, yeah, Doug, you covered that pretty well. As far as the environmental side of it, we did hit one little hiccup with TDEC wanting to include some more wetlands in the area. That is still being discussed. As far as what we found versus what they found, it's weird. It's not like a big wide area. It's just very small little linear spots. So, as far as I know,
I'm getting some looks on that. Would you mind explaining maybe where that, do you know where that might be, or?
kind of, yes. It's so,
I'm thinking
I'm
of
sure
streets.
you've all seen over here, it's essentially old pasture land, really. But there are some, again, I'm not an environmental scientist, so, I can kind of feel like I could argue with it a little bit, but there are some swales, some low spots through here where they've seen wetland or aquatic type vegetation. It's, yeah,
We should have bush hogged that before they went out.
yeah, exactly. And some Roundup or something, but.
Some of those, I
Hold on,
think,
not on
I think where some of those were under those trees. And so that's part of the problem is that we have not been able to get, we can't get our equipment underneath those trees. That's
Yeah.
usually around here in the pastures. When you see trees, that's because it's
Our,
wet to do something.
yeah, Garver's environmental personnel who went out there. What I saw, what they mapped, it was really just small spotty stuff along those swales. That was really it. But TDEC, and they kind of said, well, not surprisingly, they found some additional wetland area. So the cultural resources study that went out there, as far as I know, they're done with all their work. They are putting their reports together. They did mention 3 buildings on airport property that they were going to, I don't remember exactly what the word was, but kind of recommend for historic register buildings. And one was the terminal, one was the Quonset hut, and one was, I believe it's the EAA hangar. And I kind of advised to them that, no, don't do that. So.
We need to bulldoze the Quonset hut tonight.
Yes.
This, yeah, as a civil engineer, I want to go build. I want to see things built, and as the environmental cultural resources side, I think they like to look at preserving stuff as is. So we're still waiting for some clarification on exactly what that's going to bring about. Their recommendation, I don't know how that necessarily turns into that actually happening. So I've mentioned the Quonset hut has issues and it's usable, but really needs to be a new building.
Mary Kay look on that one. She's a tenant. She agrees.
I mentioned, the terminal's got a ton of renovations anticipated for, not just for aesthetics, but for ADA accessibility. And then again, too, with the EAA hangar, again, it's an old building that is really past its useful life. So those are really the 2 issues we're hanging on at this point. Once that's sorted out, then we can get the final draft over to TDOT for their approval, and then we still have to do a public involvement meeting. So
that gives you a general idea, because we've seen quite a few different people coming through on the studies. We've had some interesting people for the archaeological people were interesting. But we've also had it for quite a few drilling rigs out here and different things of that nature where people have been taking different samples.
Yes, so that's another thing that's been going on is with the MTSU project, they've had a geotechnical engineer going out there and doing corings, getting ideas on, soil. We're gonna have to cut, fill where the bedrock exists. So it's all over.
So fall of 27.
That's the latest idea of the big, that's the big one. That's the bigger campus. I think I'm not allowed to say campus, the bigger hub. But it is for the overall process for the pro pilot side of things now, not necessarily on the maintenance side. And I think that's the idea, is that they're going to end up staging it through from flight to maintenance to jumping from the.
Hopefully we can see that once we start construction, we don't stop construction until everything is done.
If there's any way to move up the construction phase, I think that would be beneficial for our local students, or, them to be able to go through that.
Yes, sir.
So it would be helpful.
I'd like to start tomorrow.
Yeah, I'd like to.
But big picture things, as far as renderings, and I know they went and they said, all right, we're over about $25 million of what we thought we were going to have. So when it comes to the folks that were getting approval of the final product and drawings and renderings, that was pushed back because we went over budget, I understand. So does anybody here today know an update on where we are on what the physical campus is going to look like?
I think it's still under design.
As far as finishes on the buildings, I know that's still being designed. What was almost kind of 3 facilities connected together. You had the main building where we had offices, student facilities, and then you had a 147 school maintenance school on one side, and that was turned perpendicular from the others. Then you had the 140 school on the other side. Well, the school just now swapped sides. 141 is now going to be built on the north end of the site. There's going to be a 50-foot separation between that building and the administrative building, or administrative classroom type building. And then again, when it comes to the next phase to build the 147, the maintenance school, again, another 50-foot separation. So you don't have one large interconnected facility. It'll be connected by a covered walkway, but it's not all. If you look at it from a top-down footprint, it's not all one building.
And is there any timeline on that as far as they,
As far as like a rendering.
yes, elevations?
I don't know. We were supposed to have a kind of a big design meeting tomorrow, but that's been pushed back a week. So that's certainly a question I can bring up next Friday.
Okay, thank you. I can know that.
The other one, there's two other things real quick associated with that. One is, we met again, MTSU, and then also I hosted here the Air Guard and the Army Guard in reference to the control tower. That's still all moving. We all have some different orders to do on some different things as far as they're concerned. So that relationship is still ongoing and still working well. The other thing is we got a meeting next Tuesday with Big TDOT in reference to how to get MTSU's campus onto 231. That should be interesting because of where some of their initial, I think, drawings threw it out there. The line of sights weren't right and a few other things. So, and how to work up getting the traffic light and starting the traffic signal and things like that.
Turning
So,
lane, all that.
turning
fun
lane.
stuff, yeah.
all that good fun stuff. So that's going to be some of the next things that they're going to start seeing a lot of survey work for that kind of things out there as well.
We have started that process, the TDOT permitting process for that.
Yeah. Well, that's what's going to
It
get,
should
when
be.
they start moving equipment back in the back, that little hill, some people have seen it and have talked about it, but then they start seeing some equipment. Well, now when they start seeing some survey flags out closer to the road and things like that, people will start asking. So we'll try to keep you as up to date as possible because when people find out you're associated with the airport, they'll start asking you questions, assuming you know all. So we'll try to help you out as much as possible.
Anything else?
Got any room for some soccer fields out here?
Just ask Lebanon how well that works. No, it does not work well, putting soccer fields on airports.
Okay.
Appreciate you. Thank you. Planning commission, thank you. Appreciate commission.
I love it. I just don't walk from one to the other right now. I can go home.
Yeah, I've got.
I'm on that. You won't come down.
I'll take them.
You're both dead. You too.
Welcome.
We'll
get it for you.
Well,
so. So, the water lines at the dead end. Dead end south.
That's what you can see a bunch of it, and I'll add.
So we've got a water pipe test on the board. Pressure for 2
That's just
ICT.
an open invitation.
We need a, we'll use this all on 20 foot.
Okay, well, I'm trying to